Hello, everyone. I'm Lauren Williams, Senior Editor at Defense One, and I'm excited to welcome a conversation with Colonel Michelle Idle, the Deputy Commander for Space Systems Command at the United States Space Force. Colonel, thank you so much for being here.
Lauren, thank you for inviting me to partake in this conversation.
Awesome. So let's get right into it. Tell us about what Space Systems Command does and what the command's priorities are for this year.
Absolutely. Thank you again for inviting me to join you today. So Space Systems Command is the United States Space Force's premier acquisition arm. One of the things that we often like to say is you can't fly it until we buy it. So space starts here. So we are responsible for acquiring the satellites, the ground systems, the communication systems that link the two, and also procuring the launch services and executing that function just to make sure that we've got the assets the Department of Defense needs to do its mission.
And so for this year, so 2020, fiscal year 2024, even though, 2025 budget is supposed to be coming out this week. So we'll talk about that in a bit. Tell me what the priorities are for this year. What are the top things on your plate on buying and making sure you get it off the ground?
Yeah. So right now, actually, one of the things that we're trying to focus on is finishing the stand-up of this field command. So as you know, the Space Force itself is about 4.5 years old. Space Systems Command is about 2.5 years old. And we came out of the old Space and Missile Systems Center. And so we are going to finish that process of going from an acquisition center into a field command that's focused on the acquisition of these space systems. So from a headquarters perspective, that's what we're going to be looking at is how do we make sure that we organize, train, and equip our force below us, all of those program executive officers, so that they can actually get their job done, which is acquiring these exquisite capabilities to deliver capability to the warfighter.
And what effect does being under temporary funding, the continuing resolution, and we're about, 5 months, almost 6 months into not having a permanent budget, how is that affecting your mission?
It definitely does affect our mission, right? There's certain rules in place about what we can and cannot execute when it comes to new programs. So getting a budget will definitely free us up to be able to better provide these capabilities. Right now we're going to work under the constraints that we have. We're going to do the best we can to deliver anything that we need to for the warfighter. But you are correct that their hands are tied a little bit here. It does affect us across the board, and we're just going to try to keep making the best decisions we can in this fiscal environment.
One of the things about space capabilities that I think is interesting is how much of it is outside of government control and operation, but it's relied on so heavily for various different reasons, even like weather. So could you talk a bit about, how the command is working with industry, make sure that those capabilities are ready for use?
So the last 10 years, the space industry has it's expanded beyond belief. I know, we all know that we're watching it. It's actually unbelievable. The capabilities that industry and commercial partners are bringing are things we never thought that they would be able to do. We have a history of building exquisite systems to deliver capabilities, whether it's to the consumer, right, with GPS, which feeds not only the warfighters, but also our economic industry here in the United States, but also missile warning, missile tracking, the things that we've done really, really well in the past. I don't think 10 years ago, if you asked somebody what commercial would bring to those different capability areas, that we would have ever imagined that we'd have what we have today. The fact that we can purchase some of our space domain awareness data, again, from commercial providers. 15, 20 years ago, that was something the United States government did solely. So the expansion of commercial industry has it has definitely changed how we go about delivering those capabilities to the warfighter. It's given us many more tools and an ability to really think about what do we need to spend taxpayer dollars on, and how do we drive those investments so that maybe we aren't building these exquisite systems, but instead we're leveraging our industry partners.
Are there any challenges there, or are like space companies just really kind of like, yes, of course we would love to work with you, or is there sometimes like a bit of give and take there?
Boy, I'll tell you, I think our partnerships with the industry are really phenomenal. I think that you're going to find a lot of everybody comes to the table and says, "How can we work together? How do we get to yes?" Um, I think a very public example, right, is the use of Starlink and SpaceX's network in the war in Ukraine. And so we were able to build off of that and go, "Hey, what are the lessons that we learned about how that proliferated network or system is actually being used, and how do we want to build our agreement with SpaceX so that we can make sure that we can work well with them going forward?" I would be hard pressed to give you examples of friction. I think you're going to find on both the government and the industry side, there's a very collaborative attitude.
And can you expound a little bit more on some of those lessons that you've learned? Because the war has been raging on for 2 years now. So you talk about how things have developed, or how like it's changed, like how Space System Command is operating.
Yeah, so about a year ago, we stood up an office called the Commercial Space Office, and we put a senior material leader in charge of that to look a little bit more at how we're actually going to leverage commercial capability. And one of the areas in particular they're looking at is the Commercially Augmented Space Reserve. And that is a series of agreements, contractual agreements that we will have with commercial industry about how we might access their data or their satellites or ground systems, those type of things, in different times of conflict. So, establishing a contract and a way of doing business in a when there's not conflict is pretty easy. It's pretty straightforward. But what we're trying to do is take that forward look and go, hey, if there's an escalation or something bad does happen, how are we going to continue to work together? So again, taking some of those lessons learned and watching how things are going in the Ukraine is giving us that chip, I guess, to negotiate with and to build that into some of our future contracts.
You mentioned GPS earlier, and that's something that we can all relate to using, at least a little bit. Can you talk about how GPS needs are shifting and what you think they're going to look like in the future, and then where commercial technology, the industry will come in?
So one of the things that we have done recently is we have held a series of what we call reverse industry days. So in the past, when we knew we had a requirement, we on the government side, we'd put it out to industry, and then we would have a session where we'd answer questions about that requirement. What we've done is we've flipped that. And we've actually said, hey, we need ideas from industry about how we can do things better going forward. And so one of the things that we did is we had what was called a reverse industry day for position navigation and timing. And we brought industry together and we said, hey, if you could do position navigation and timing, right? That's the heart of GPS. We all call it GPS, but how would you do it differently? And so one of the things, is how else could we be providing this data to the warfighter, to the public, to our allies, to our joint forces? If there is a day where maybe GPS is contested, or maybe just have a backup, or maybe it's just an alternate system, how else could we deliver this capability? So that's one of the things that we're getting after is making sure we have that redundancy and that resiliency in that position navigation and timing system. So we keep continuing our way of life as we utilize that technology today.
So I want to move a little bit from GPS and talk about Victus Nox. Tell me about that and where you guys are.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been trying to get after is something called tactically responsive space. So how do we very quickly provide a capability to a combatant commander who has an urgent need? And we've been getting after this for several years in various forms. And as you mentioned, Victus Nox was a very recent success that we had, where we rapidly acquired a spacecraft, had specified what kind of technology needed to be on it. And then we said, all right, contractor, Millennium Space Systems, hang on to that. And when we tell you to go, you got 60 hours to get it from wherever you're storing it up to the launch site at Vandenberg and get it mated on the rocket and go. And so they did. They got it up there. They got it mated. And then we said, all right, just hang out. And sometime in the next, I believe we gave them a 28-day window that said, okay, at some point we're going to tell you to launch. And you got 24 hours. And so we did that. And they were successful. Now the actual time was 27 hours, and that actually had to do with physics. It was not about how well they actually executed. It was really about the timing of when we said go and when the launch window actually was available. So that was a really huge win for us, to be able to show that we could launch something that fast. So the team went after that to kind of break some of the rules. What do we need to break in our current acquisition system in order to acquire something that quickly? What do we have to break so that we can execute a launch that fast? What authorizations do we need to be able to speed through? What notices do we have to send out, so that we can safely execute this launch? So we were really trying to show that we could go fast, and we did. And you'll see us doing that again in the near future.
Can you say more about what the plans are in the future? Because 27 hours, that's super fast.
It's awesome.
Are you looking to go even faster, 12 hours, maybe with more payloads? Can you talk about what your immediate plans are, what we can...
Yeah. So we're gonna execute this a very similar format to Victus Nox, but let me phrase that. We're actually gonna execute it a little bit differently, with more commercial support with this, less of government procurement. And again, I think the plan is to stick to a similar timeline. But if they happen to go faster, hey, that's a great thing. So we're gonna keep trying to press the test of how quickly can we get capability on orbit.
And is there anything planned? Any more demonstrations like this? Is anything planned for the rest of this year or going into 25?
Yeah, we do have several events planned going forward. So Victus Haze is the next one, and that was we actually contracted that through DIU. So that one's out there in the public domain. There is some funding set aside for some future work as well. Again, we just want to make sure that we have that capability to respond to any threats and any urgent combatant commander needs.
And I'm curious about the role of small satellites. I mean, I cover a lot of the services and what and they're doing there, especially you mentioned GPS and having that redundancy there when you're talking about communications. Can you talk about what the command is doing there, especially in support of the other military branches?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's not traditionally been our wheelhouse, right? We've done a lot of very exquisite, large systems, and we will keep doing those, right? When we have to, we will do those. But we absolutely understand the value of a proliferated architecture, and those small satellites that come with that, the resiliency that's associated with that type of architecture. So I think when the capability can be delivered that way, I think you are going to see us procuring a small satellites in that formation where we can update that technology, maybe get our timelines down as far as how long it takes us to acquire something. Also probably affect the overall life of the satellite, length of time, but it is a pivot for us because that is not how we've traditionally done business, but we absolutely recognize the value of the small sat.
And how are you incorporating emerging technologies? And this is just something that pops into my brain, so I don't know if it's actually real, but I'm very interested in additive manufacturing and how that's being used. You can make a door handle, or you can make a panel, or a server or a system. So I'm curious, is there any consideration or weaving of those type of technologies into your portfolio?
Absolutely. So we work hand in hand with the Air Force Research Lab. We work with SpaceWorks. We have our spec contracts. So we are always looking to see, what can help us do things faster, cheaper, better. So as that type of technology matures, and if somebody can show us that there's a use case for this, I think you would see us then work to try to transition that into some of our programs of record. So we are absolutely, looking for what in industry can help us to do our jobs better, be better stewards of the taxpayer money. So anytime we can get an advantage like that, yes, we're absolutely going to go after that.
In cybersecurity, when I think of space, I automatically think cyber. And so can you talk about the role of cybersecurity and baking that into all of the capabilities that you develop and provide?
Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head there. I think that's not something that the average person in public tends to think about when they think about space, right? They think of the launch vehicles, the satellite, and all these cool things. And you're right. Cybersecurity is fundamental to us being able to present these capabilities to both the public and to the warfighters. So we are very, very aggressively incorporating cybersecurity into all of our mission systems, into our business systems, making sure that we are doing everything we can to make these systems resilient, protected from any adversarial actions. So cybersecurity is absolutely a part of every single acquisition that we're doing.
Has that become increasingly challenged, especially as, and not the pace of warfare, but at I guess the breadth of warfare becomes more electronically and digitally based. Like, how is that challenged? How you buy?
Yeah. So again, you've hit something that isn't, if you go back 10, 20 years about how we did business, we had a lot of standalone systems, right? We built a system, it had a ground station, we would pass the information up. There wasn't a lot of this interconnectivity, right? The internet as we know it now didn't exist. So that is a way that we've had to shift how we do business, recognizing that, yes, everything's connected. And how do we protect the systems that we need to protect while still getting the data where we need to get the data? It has had forced us to change how we do things and how we acquire things. You see it in our requirements documents. And we're just going to have to keep sprinting, right, to keep up with that as technology advances.
Yeah, and the threats are just constantly changing. So I know you have your work cut out for you there. Is there any updates on the weather group that the command has? Can you talk about that?
I'm sorry, what the question was with weather?
Yes, weather group.
Okay. So we are working on the next generation of weather satellites. There's a small experiment that has been put on a rideshare. So trying to figure out what that looks like going forward. But weather still means a part of our portfolio.
So we talked about a lot of things: GPS, cybersecurity, weather, small satellites. One thing I want to talk about is talent, because Space Force is not big. And one of the challenges that the Pentagon and DoD has writ large is just attracting and retaining tech talent. Can you talk about what the command is doing to make sure that you have the best and brightest?
Yeah. Huge area for us, right, is how do we get that talent? So General Gutlein, when he helped stand up the command, recognized that sometimes hiring the talent in LA is not the easiest thing. So he encouraged us to go look for talent outside of Los Angeles when needed. And General Grant, only a month into the seat, but definitely seems inclined to continue that as well. We are looking for talent where we can. So you can't really see, I don't know if you can see, I'm actually not in the Space Force. So I'm actually an Air Force reservist. So we have a whole handful of reservists that are on duty right now helping to backfill. We are hiring civilian talent wherever we can get it. We've hired some new contracting officers out of Wright-Patt. I was just talking to International Affairs this morning. They've hired some of the foreign military sales expertise that exists in Dayton as well to help us build our foreign military sales program. Just last month, unfortunately, JPL here locally in LA had to lay off some folks. We've been to a couple hiring fairs already and have been able to grab some talent from there as well. So we are going to have to continue to make some really hard decisions about how we staff our offices. We need to make sure that where we have inherently governmental functions, we put government people in that, and where we don't, that we bring in that contractor support to be able to help us get our job done. I think you're going to see that General Grant, in his tenure, is going to be very focused on our workforce development and how we build, strong program managers and engineers going forward. So there'll be an emphasis on that, and I do think we will continue to hire talent in the places that we can find it, and we will get better at making, this remote and hybrid work for us.
I've heard of this model. Fleet Cyber Command, I think, has a similar effort where they're using reservists to fill the need. Can you talk a little bit about, I guess, what these billets are that you're trying trying to fill?
It depends on the need. So we will go out and advertise and look for people that maybe have skill sets in their civilian jobs that we can then leverage in uniform. So we do have some folks with some really interesting backgrounds. There's some folks that are venture capitalists. We leverage a lot of our folks that are in cybersecurity. You asked about cybersecurity earlier. Again, that's where reservists can really come in and help us make sure that we are thinking about things that are the most current with that. We will just do our best to fill gaps wherever possible. And again, we are also not afraid to move people around, right? As we look across our talent base, where do we need to actually put people? So moving both the active duty and our civilians around, and then plugging in reservists where we can to make sure that we can continue to deliver the warfighter capabilities.
And in that same vein, I think Doug Beck, the head of the Defense Innovation Unit, he's also a reservist. So I think you're on to something. This is a trend that's gonna continue. I want to pivot a little bit and talk about the future a bit more. I know you can't get ahead of the Pentagon, but we would all really love to know what we can expect in 25. If you could just give us some broad overviews of what what we can expect to see when the budget comes out.
Okay. Well, what I will hit on is some of the changes that we're going to make with the Great Power Competition. So I know you guys were tracking that. The Secretary and the CSO, brought up some of that at the AFA Warfighter Symposium just last month. So you're going to see us make a few changes in how we are organized. Again, finishing that alignment from a center to a field command. But some of that's also going to be figuring out how we are going to best interface and what, if any, of our functions will move over to what is going to be the Space Futures Command. So if you're tracking, that's one of the things that the Secretary has asked us to stand up both on the Air Force and the Space Force side. And so we're going to be looking at how that will affect how we do business, because again, those are the people that are going to help us determine what requirements that we're going to be building to and what capabilities that we're going to need to deliver. So as we stand that Futures Command up, that's gonna affect a little bit again about how we do business, how we maybe test some of our systems with regard to warfighting and exercises. So that will be a big focus for us as well. The Chief of Space Operations has asked us to really focus on how we're going to develop our workforce. And the first thing that I know he's already talked a little bit about is the officer training course and how we actually assess these new officers and what exposure we give to them before they move into becoming Space Force officers. So we'll be working with that. There will be some changes also with how our Space Systems Integration Office is actually aligned. The way that we work right now is Dr. Leon, as the head of that, does have some integration responsibilities, not just across our command, but also across the broader space acquisition enterprise. So outside of SSC as well, with like the Space Development Agency and the Space Rapid Capabilities Office. She also does coordination with the NRO and MDA. We expect to see her elevated, and so that office will have a little bit more of purview across anybody who's spending Space Force money. So that'll change a little bit about how we're operating as well.
And how do you think that this new alignment, and I know things are still, they're coming together. Yeah. Things still need to be filled out, but how do you think this will change the space capability the landscape? How will it change launches going forward? I mean, thinking maybe 5-10 years from now, this big change.
Yeah, I think we're already seeing that, again, across that entire space acquisition enterprise. We're seeing very much a collaborative coalition. I think that's going to continue, where we're making deliberate decisions as different organizations with our different skill sets about what capabilities we're going to be acquiring. So we're not duplicating effort unless it's intentional, that we're going after the gaps that we need to go after to actually close our kill chains. So I think you're going to continue to see that. I think you're going to continue to see that each of these organizations has their niche that they're good at, right? The NRO is going to keep doing, all of our, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance satellites. MDA is going to keep doing what they do with missile warning, missile tracking, and missile defense. I think you'll continue to see it, but I think you're going to continue to see the increased collaboration. So again, we're making deliberative decisions as an enterprise. Launch, that's a whole nother beast, right? That is with what we're seeing with what commercial's doing. Launch is going to continue to test us. The number of launches that the commercial industry is pulling off definitely is testing our infrastructure. It's testing our manning. And we are going to have to step up and make sure that we can continue to support that pace, because I don't think that's going to slow down anytime soon.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great place to leave it. Colonel Idle, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure chatting with you today. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in. Stay tuned, as next week we will continue our State of Defense programming with the Marines and the Army. We hope to see you there. I'm Lauren Williams from Defense One.